Didn't you know about that? Every new thing Mehmet Demirsoy learned about the woman he once loved was like a knife in the man's heart. No. When İpek Şahin told what she knew about Elif Yılmaz's son, what was in Mehmet Demirsoy's mind started to fall into place a little more. In response to the information provided by the woman, Demirsoy summarized all the developments in the matter to her and her husband in recent days. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the Şahin couple and Mehmet Demirsoy ended their meeting. Demirsoy paid the bill. According to the agreement they made between them, Mehmet Demirsoy would tell Kemal Gürsoy and Ismail Çetin about this meeting as soon as possible. Before leaving the venue, Mehmet Demirsoy took a long look at the riot of colors created by the summer sun on the Bosphorus on the one hand, and at the young woman who could no longer walk on her own. In the afternoon of the next day, it was Kemal Gürsoy's turn to be examined for the first time. Although Sisley Research Hospital was extremely crowded and busy in general, the plastic surgery department was a quiet department where relatively few patients came for examination most of the time. On that day there was only one person waiting in front of Dr. Semih Karakak's door, except for Kemal Gürsoy. The extremely thin young woman, dressed in a strange outfit, had arrived 10 minutes after Kemal Gürsoy, sat in one of the empty chairs, and had been staring at Kemal Gürsoy, trying not to show it since she arrived. She seemed to make the man look like someone. After 20 minutes of waiting, Kemal Gürsoy's name and the patient number written on the barcode appeared on the digital board above Karakak's door. Gürsoy got up from his chair, turned to the woman who continued to look at him out of the corner of her eye, smiled artificially, knocked on the doctor's door and entered. "Mr. Kemal?" asked Semih Karakak procedurally on the screen in front of him, while checking the appointment information of his patient via MHRS. "Yes, it's me," Kemal Gürsoy said in the manner of a patient who is responsible and respectful of his doctor. Dr. Semih Karakak took off his glasses and put them on his desk. He turned his gaze from the monitor to his patient. "Please, Mr. Kemal, sit," he said, pointing to the one on the left side of his desk from the two chairs on the other side of his table. "Tell me, how can I help you?" Kemal Gürsoy said, "A friend of mine says that when I started to get older my eyelids started to droop and my eyes looked squinting," he said seriously. "I think this is a common problem for many of my fellow citizens. Do you think my eyelids need to be treated?" As he said this, it occurred to him that there are people who have actually undergone surgery for this kind of nonsense. He could hardly contain himself from laughing. Semih Karakak got up from his desk before answering. He went to the other side and approached Kemal Gürsoy. He leaned slightly towards the man and said, "Would you please take off your glasses?" "Sure." Dr. Karakak carefully examined Gürsoy's face. "You're a charismatic guy. Your image reminded me of the thing. That painter." Kemal Gürsoy knew who the man was referring to. But he didn't make a sound because he found it more fun to appear not to know. The doctor continued. "As I said, you have an expressive face and I agree with your friend who advised you. With a small operation, we can provide you with a younger and more impressive appearance. If I was a real patient you could make a shit out of my face." "Really? I'm so glad. Such a change will do me good. When can we do this?" "Take your time, Mr. Kemal. Some tests are required first. We'll talk about the details later." Dr. Semih Karakak sat at his desk. He scribbled something on small cube-shaped pieces of paper. While handing them to Kemal Gürsoy, he explained what they were and from which units he should make an appointment. A few minutes later, Kemal Gürsoy opened the door to leave the room. "Thank you, Mr. Semih," he said. "By the way, I forgot to tell you something important. That's my friend who advised me. She knew you well. She asked me to convey his greetings." Dr. Semih Karakak was enthusiastically and proudly discarded. "Really? What's your friend's name?" "Eileen Sargin. And she made one more piece of advice. You could have done your precious surgeries on your own rough flesh." The young man got out of the shower. He dried both his head and body with the same plain white towel. After wiping the steam accumulated in the mirror with his hand, he took a long look at his own image. First he examined his face. Then he took a step or two back and turned slightly to the side. He looked at the surgical scar at waist level. Before getting into the shower, he picked up his underwear from where he left it and put it on, which he threw away next to the bathroom cabinet. Now he was supposed to be happy and peaceful. At least that's what was planned. He was relieved of his physical pain. And his life was no longer in danger. But he couldn't escape the mental pain he was going through. After that incident he wasn't even sure who he was anymore. He was remorseful. He couldn't sleep at night. He wasn't happy. He wasn't peaceful either. Was it all worth it? Yes, maybe his life was saved, but did he really want that kind of life? The voice from his phone dispelled his dark thoughts. The caller was a very familiar. When Semel Eason picked up his phone, he had just arrived at his workplace and hadn't even had his morning coffee. "Good morning, my friend, how are you? What is it, or did you see me in your dream or something?" "Hi, Semel. I am fine. Sorry to bother. I have a request for you." "That's what I was afraid of. Tell me. Can you prepare a report for me regarding the lawsuits that have been carried out for various reasons in the medical world in Turkey in the last 15 years but have not been concluded?" "It would take me a while, but I think yes. Isn't the Mehmet Demirsoy case? What's going through your mind?" "I'll explain it to you later. If I give details right now, I will guide you. I have to make sure myself." "What exactly is it that you want?" "I need the names of health workers whose names have been involved in any medical crime rumors but who have not been criminally sanctioned because their guilt cannot be proven, in which city and in which health institution they worked at the time of the investigations, their titles, branches and which university they graduated from." "Woe betide me. Did you have any other wishes or desires, Kemal?" "Yes, there is. Can you find out the dates of the official leave taken by the employees in the last year and whether there is an abnormal flow of money in their bank accounts, primarily Dr. Semih Karakok, Nurse Elif Yilmaz Demirsoy and the late Nurse Eileen Sargent from Sisley Research Hospital?" "You expect too much from life, my friend." "Thank you. I knew it wouldn't reject me. I'm waiting to hear from you." Asterisk. 2 hours later, Kemal Gürsoy's phone rang. The caller was Mehmet Demirsoy. Demirsoy conveyed to Kemal Gürsoy the meeting he had with İpek Şahin the previous day and what the woman had told him. Then he asked what he was going to do about it and if there was any improvement. "I would like to meet Mrs. İpek in person at an appropriate time, Mr. Mehmet. Please let him know that I will get back to him as soon as possible. And try to keep your mind at ease. If things go the way I think they would, this may be closed sooner and in a better way than you could have hoped." "Mr. Kemal?" "Yes, Mr. Mehmet? What do you think, son? Could he be alive?" "Mr. Mehmet, we are both experienced enough men to know that anything is possible in life unless proven otherwise. Isn't that so?" Mehmet Demirsoy could not answer. On the evening of the same day, the off-white Lada Niva was waiting at a convenient distance from the entrance gate of the Sisley Research Hospital. Kemal Gürsoy looked at his watch. It was 8 o'clock in the evening. He had been there since 6:30. The wait for hot weather was even more troublesome than it should have been. He hoped that the previous day's examination session had intimidated Semih Karakok enough. In such cases, people would instinctively protect themselves. That would have meant they would have a deficit. At least it would be nice if it did. Because Kemal Gürsoy was too old for this type of car. And gasoline is also too expensive. If this method did not work, the alternative solution would be to install a tracking device in Dr. Karakok's vehicle. Kemal Gürsoy hoped that this would not be necessary. As 8:30 approached, the doctor's vehicle finally appeared. The metallic gray Lexus LS exited the section where vehicles enter and exit the hospital, reached the wide opening, then curled to the right and entered the highway. "Here we go. I hope I'm not rowing in vain." Kemal Gürsoy immediately started his vehicle and started to watch Semih Karakok from an appropriate distance. The luxury car first proceeded in an easterly direction along Kadırgalar Street, a busy area with multi-story buildings on both sides. Kemal Gürsoy looked like he was going to miss his target because of the traffic lights here, but then he managed to catch it. The metallic gray vehicle then turned right and continued on Dolmabahce Street towards Besiktas. Dolmabahce Street, which connects Kabata's and Besiktas districts with a view of the Bosphorus, was much more spacious than Kadırgalar Street. Although the street was crowded, traffic flowed relatively smoothly thanks to its width. As Kemal Gürsoy passed by Dolmabahce Palace, he thought that this place, where he secretly followed a doctor, was a place where local and foreign tourists flocked. From there he continued towards the Bosphorus Bridge and crossed the bridge. Due to the habitual density on the bridge, he was in danger of losing sight of his target for the second time. But this time he was able to overcome it. After crossing the bridge, the Lexus LS followed the O2 highway. Then he left the Kavacık exit and continued on his way. From this point on, the road was quite calm. It was past 9 o'clock and it was dark. A long and tedious chase began, which Kemal Gürsoy could not foresee at that moment where and how it would end. Gürsoy, whose 20-year-old car does not have air conditioning, considered himself lucky that at least the weather cooled down a little. The bar called Haskos in Nişantaşı is located on Bronze Street, and if you are someone who does not mind walking a little, it is within walking distance of Sisley Research Hospital. The neighborhood where the bar is located is a lively and relatively luxurious part of the city. There are many shopping malls, hotels, restaurants and cafes in the surrounding area. The interior of the bar is built with dark walls. The decoration consists of benches and stools upholstered in black leather, a ceramic floor decorated with traditional geometric motifs. It was 9:30 in the evening when the venue witnessed a tense conversation between two healthcare worker friends. The reason why the two friends chose this place to meet was not because they liked the tasteful decoration of the bar or because they loved the beautiful districts of Istanbul. They had simply chosen a location far enough away that it would not attract the attention of their colleagues at the hospital, and close enough that they would not waste time. Elif Yilmaz was nervous. Tunçe Keskinol sat in front of him as if nothing had happened. She barely restraining herself from attacking the man who was sipping his beer with great calmness. Dr. Tunçe Keskinol asked nonchalantly, "Have you been able to find out who the man is?" Elif Yilmaz said, "For now we only know that his name is Kemal Gürsoy. That's from patient records. But we'll find out soon. Let's hope he's not the police or anything like that. So what do we do now?" "Semi is currently going to Sile. He is about to arrive. He's going to tidy up. Then he's going to talk to our boys. Why didn't he tell me about it himself? I can't believe you really asked that, Tunçe." Tunçe Keskinol looked at the woman who looked like she was about to have a heart attack with a blank expression. Then he took another sip of his beer. Kemal Gürsoy understood that their target was Sile from the signs he came across on the road followed by the Lexus LS. Their journey, which was approaching an hour, continued without incident for 50 kilometers on the scenic wide highway. The metallic gray Lexus LS has passed through several intersections and access roads, finally reaching the entrance to Sile. Sile, which has a population of around 40,000, was located on the Anatolian side of Istanbul. The district, which gave the impression that it belonged to the Black Sea region, not the Marmara region, thanks to its coast to the Black Sea and its forested and mountainous geography, was a place frequently preferred by wealthy Istanbulites who wanted to escape from the hustle and bustle and relax. Kemal Gürsoy, who had been focused on keeping an eye on the vehicle in front of him for the last hour and a half, was startled by the sharp light of the lightning that suddenly flashed while following the intersections that turned from the highway to Sile, and the full sound of thunder piercing his ear a second later. The strong wind that manifested itself immediately afterwards slightly shook the moving vehicle. He turned his attention back to the metallic gray car, which he was careful to keep a constant distance between. Now he should have been even more careful. He was not familiar with the streets of Sile. Somewhere in the distance, the light of the lightning flashed again, illuminating the place. This time there was no thunder or Kemal Gürsoy did not hear it. Instead it began to rain. Gürsoy turned on his vehicle's wipers, which had been dormant for years. As the shabby Lada drove after the expensive Lexus, the driver of the vehicle watched the historic wooden houses, souvenir shops, fishermen and restaurants lined both sides of Sile's narrow streets. "I wonder if I should move here." Kemal Gürsoy began to feel that the end of the journey was approaching as he followed the vehicle approaching the seashore through the streets of the settlement. Under the stiffening wind and ever-increasing rain, the Lexus LS made its way to the 90-meter-high lighthouse built on the steep 60-meter-high slope on the Black Sea coast. Designed by British engineers in 1859, the imposing black-and-white lantern, whose light could be seen from 20 nautical miles away, took on an epic appearance under the light of the lightning flashing again. When the metallic gray vehicle stopped about 100 yards from the lighthouse, there was no longer a man-made structure around, except for a couple of makeshift huts. Kemal Gürsoy, who had turned off his headlights to avoid being noticed for the last kilometer, could barely see the silhouette getting out of the metallic gray car with the effect of darkness and storm when he stopped his vehicle 50 meters before the Lexus. As Semi Karakok got out of his vehicle and ran towards the house 10 meters away, he cursed the pouring rain and the trouble he had wrapped himself in. He entered the deserted house at the top of the mountain, not knowing that he was being watched by a curious pair of eyes. Kemal Gürsoy, who was sitting in his vehicle patiently waiting for what would happen, noticed that one of the lights of the house, which was not fully understood from the distance, was turned on from the inside. "Is it because of me? Come on, we're in this together. Moreover, we have done everything for you. For your son. Be reasonable, please, Elif. Don't mess it up there. You know what I mean. We all went into this willingly on purpose, right? But until this was done we had to pay attention to some issues. Now we can go to the cannon's mouth just because you can't control your zipper." Tunçe Keskinol took another sip of his beer. "Nonsense. Is it my fault that that fugitive dilutes the business because of jealousy? Besides, am I the one who hid the corpse so clumsily?" Elif Yilmaz couldn't believe the man's brazenness. She breathed deeply to calm herself down. She agreed with only one of what Tunçe Keskinol said. They had to be reasonable. What had happened had happened. Kemal Gürsoy, who had been waiting in his car for more than 2 hours, was about to run out of patience. It was past midnight. The rain had stopped. "What the hell are you messing up inside?" Kemal Gursoy took off his glasses. He wiped away the sweat that had accumulated on his forehead. Although it was late at night, an abject heat had engulfed the atmosphere after the unexpected storm. He wiped away the layer of steam that covered his glasses with his t-shirt. He put them back on. The glove box opened its eye. He took 2 sips of the soupy water in the plastic bottle. He grimaced. He did not put the bottle in the glove compartment. He left it on the seat next to him. He fixed his gaze again on the house he had been able to make out vaguely in the darkness. It crossed his mind how impressive this sight would have been if he had not pursued such a disgraceful business. At the same time, he noticed that the light on his target house, which had been burning for the last 2.5 hours, had gone out. Less than a minute later, Semi Karakok's silhouette appeared outside. The man had something big on his lap. It was impossible to tell what it was, but even from this distance it was clear that whatever it was big and heavy. Karakok opened the back door of his car. He placed the package in his lap in the back seat. He closed the door. He then opened the front door and settled into the driver's seat. He turned on the ignition. Kemal Gursoy, who was watching his target with careful eyes, started his own Lada as soon as he noticed that Semi Karakok had turned on the headlights of his vehicle, which was less used than a doctor. Putting it in reverse and waiting, he entered a gap that he had his eye on, hoping that the vehicle that would soon pass in front of him would not notice. 2 minutes later, Dr. Semi Karakok passed in front of Kemal Gursoy. Kemal Gursoy waited for a few minutes just in case. Then he got out of his vehicle. He was indecisive for a while. There was a distance of 100 or 150 yards between him and the house. Was it safer to leave your car here to avoid attracting attention, or to have it on hand to drive away immediately in case of an emergency? He wasn't so sure. He didn't think too much. He was going to walk. With quick steps, he made his way towards the house that Semi Karakok had just left. Walking 100 yards down the road from the goat trail became clear to what the house looked like. Like most of the buildings typical of that area, it was a 1-story old but solid house made of a mixture of stone and wood. He had a small garden. The garden gate was built later and disrupted the integrity of the overall appearance of the house. Kemal Gursoy opened the garden gate, taking care not to make a sound. So far so good. He went into the garden. With the same slow movements, he closed the door behind him. He looked around as much as the dark night would allow before moving forward. He tried to figure out what kind of place he was in. Apparently, this house had nothing out of the ordinary, except that it was a bit neglected and left to its own devices. The front of the garden and the house was located at a right angle to the hillside, where the magnificent lighthouse was located, if it is considered as a straight line. About 5 meters after entering through the garden gate, the shabby concrete floor, 1 meter wide, split in two, one arm curving to the left and moving towards the entrance door of the house, while the other arm extended 10 or 15 meters from the right side of the house to the back. In the part of the garden outside the concrete road, there were a few half-dried dwarf trees and extremely neglected flowers and shrubs, the species of which Kemal Gursoy could not predict and did not care about. Kemal Gursoy proceeded to the left and reached the large old-fashioned wooden door of the house. He held the flashlight of his mobile phone to the lock of the door. He took a monkey out of his pocket and put it in the lock. After tinkering for a while, he managed to unlock it. As he entered, he did not neglect to curse his friend and then himself firmly because he was gassed by Ismail Chetin and involved in this damn business. At that age, if something happened to him here, no one would declare him a hero or miss him. The world wouldn't be a better place. When he entered, he was confronted by a small hall with an empty and flimsy coat rack and a shoe closet. From here, it was reached by stairs protected by wooden railings. That's what Kemal Gursoy did. The vast space he reached was the kind of place where many of the rooms typical of old houses opened into the same common room. The large hall with high ceilings was empty as far as Kemal Gursoy could see with the light emitted by his mobile phone, except for the large dusty carpet on the floor, an old table and 2 chairs. Kemal Gursoy first opened the door on the left side close to the stairs. Kitchen. A kitchen with no tables, chairs or dishwashers, home to an empty fridge, dirty raki glasses and coffee cups abandoned to their fate on the old-fashioned counter. There's nothing wrong with that. The second door on the left. It opened to the toilet and bathroom. Kemal Gursoy opened the first of the doors on the right. In the small room with only one window, there was nothing but a mattress that was rusted, had its springs blown out, and it was obvious at first glance that it had not been used by anyone for a long time. Gursoy opened the fourth door, almost confident that whatever it was he was looking for would be found in the last room he had left. He was stunned by what he saw. Dr. Tunke Keskinal, a man who was born extremely carefree and devoid of moral values, was tipsy after the third beer he drank. Ignoring Elif Yilmaz, who had been eating her head for hours, she cut off the young barista behind the counter 5 meters away, who was preparing something to drink for the customers with his back turned. The brunette girl's short hair was black. He had a small tattoo on his right shoulder. It was obvious that Dr. Keskinal was delusional as he looked at the girl. The man returned to the world, startled by Elif Yilmaz's screeching voice. "I'm getting up, Tunke. I warned you. I said I would. The work is serious. The rest is up to you." Okay, I get it. Don't worry about you. Are you getting up? Reason? Where are you going to go? Home. I will rest and wait to hear from Semi. Elif Yilmaz looked at her old friend with disgust. Damn the day we get you involved. She left the bar with quick steps. The last room was almost empty. There was nothing in the window of the room, which was larger than the other, except for the curtain and an old coffee table, which were, presumably, attached so as not to attract the attention of prying eyes. The situation was really strange. What the hell had Semi Karakok been doing here all these hours? What was it that he cradled and carried to his car? Who actually owned this house and for what purpose was it used? Kemal Gursoy thought that he had over-honored himself by exaggerating the effect that he expected the examination he had gone to the previous day to have on Semi Karakok. The man's coming here might have nothing to do with him. But before he made that decision, he had to make sure he searched all parts of the house. He was stripped of his thoughts by the sounds of conversation and footsteps he heard. They had intruders. Damn, who are they? Gursoy first tried to understand where the sounds were coming from. If I'm not mistaken, 2 adult males were walking towards the house talking in the yard. When he entered the kitchen and hid behind the broken refrigerator that smelled of mold, he once again carefully cursed, first to Ismail Chetin and then to himself without breaking the order. But this time he double cursed himself for forgetting to take his pistol with him. In this goddamn place, if someone did what he predicted, there was a chance that he too had come to the end of the road. He waited with bated breath. But he wasn't afraid. No one entered the house. After waiting 4 or 5 minutes, he plucked up the courage. He came out of the kitchen. The hall was empty. He popped up his ears to check if there was any sound. He couldn't hear anything. He went down the stairs. When he reached the door, he stopped again. There is no sound. He took a deep breath. He opened the door slowly. There was no one in the yard. Taking care not to make a sound, he made his way towards the garden gate. He reached for his hand on the latch of the garden gate to get out and slip out of there. He hadn't come here to run away without being able to do anything. His instincts told him to look back. He did as he was told so as not to upset his instincts. He glanced around. After a few seconds, he realized that he had not gone there for nothing. A faint light was not coming from the interior of the house, but from the right rear side at ground level. As he walked silently into the light, he remembered that he had often done such things in his youth, but that he was wearing a police uniform at the time, and that he had not forgotten his pistol at home. He walked 10 meters from the right side of the old house, which was built of wood and stone, to the back. He saw the narrow staircase leading down from the rear right corner and the door leading in 2 yards below the level of the garden. The door probably opened to a storage or coal shed similar to an old house. Kemal Gursoy was not going to go down and get himself killed. He would try to figure out what was going on inside by looking through the small window that ventilated the warehouse, where the light was coming from. The small knee-high window was covered with frosted glass and was slightly ajar. Kemal Gursoy crouched on his knees. He peered through a few centimeters of the window. Although the range was narrow, what was inside was more or less visible, since the angle was favorable. The 2 men, who turned out to be younger, were putting things in boxes in the room and piling them up at the door, while at the same time having a tense conversation. I told you it was going to go haywire. We weren't going to mess with it at all. Don't talk idle. No one forced you. Stretch it out. It wasn't good that they found her body. Did you think she wouldn't be found? Do you think the end of the matter will reach out to us? After all, we didn't kill her. What we do is run errands. Shut that up. We didn't come here to have a conversation. Do you think the boss noticed that we screwed up about the boy? I don't know. It's interesting that the newspapers don't say anything about it. What do you think about it? Shut up. We're up to our throats in trouble. I don't want to talk about these things with you. Let's get this job done and get out of here as soon as possible. Kemal Gursoy took a few photos of the old warehouse with his mobile phone to document the trouble the man was talking about. The images were blurry and a little dark. But if you looked closely, it wasn't hard to figure out what was going on. The warehouse of the house was used as a kind of operating room, and this under-the-stairs operating room was being liquidated at this very moment. Kemal Gursoy was only able to wake up when the phone rang for the third time. He was all over and had a headache. The caller was Simul Izan. "Good morning, Simul. How are you?" "Good morning? Are you kidding? It was 5 o'clock in the evening, Kemal." "I'm fine. How are you?" Kemal Gursoy looked at his watch. His friend was right about the clock. He sat up in his bed and tried to collect himself. "I came home in the morning. It was a tiring night, but I'm fine, don't worry." "Or are you?" "Yes, the documents you asked me for are ready. I sent them to your email address, let you know. Let me know after reviewing." "You're the one." "Absolutely." Kemal Gursoy barely got up from his bed. He hurriedly took a shower. He put on his clean but crumpled Uniron clothes. He made herself a coffee and spread peanut butter on a slice of stale bread. He sat down at his computer. He opened the email from Simul Izan. Attached were 2 separate Word files. The first of the files dealt with medical crimes committed in the country's recent past. The second file contained the account flows of the employees of Sisley Research Hospital, the days they took leave, the institutions they worked for before, and the university they graduated from. Simul Izan was cautious and did not limit the first file to the cases that were not concluded. The fact that he had done this would have extended Kemal Gursoy's review period a little, but it would have prevented the possibility of something being overlooked. The list included cases of fake doctors, corruption and bribery, faulty treatment and negligence, organ trafficking, counterfeit drugs, the thalidomide scandal, overprescribing of opioid drugs, and unethical genetic manipulations. After a quick glance at the 5-page list, Kemal Gursoy collapsed the image and dragged it to the right side of the screen. He also opened the second list. This list included more subheadings and was longer than the first. He placed this on the left side of the screen as well. Now he could see both files simultaneously. He took a sip of his coffee. He took a bite of his peanut butter bread. He picked up a pen and paper. After 3 hours of work, he found that he had achieved very satisfactory results. He grinned to himself. 2 days later, Mehmet Demirsoy was once again with İPek and Barak Sahin at the same cafe in Ortaköy. This time, Kemal Gursoy, Simul Izan and Ismail Çetin were accompanying them. İPek Sahin told Kemal Gursoy and 2 of his friends about her friendship with Elif and the accident that happened to her during her student years. "I'm sorry for what happened to you, Mrs. İPek. Unfortunately, these things happen in life. Thank you, Mr. Kemal. You've taken your time and made it this far. This is precious to me. But it's not my intention to make drama. To exchange information and help you do what is necessary if you see fit." Kemal Gursoy took a sip of mineral water with lemon. "Of course. As far as I know, that's what we're all here for. I'm going to share with you what I've been able to find so far. But I don't think you have told me all you know yet." The young woman, who was sitting in a wheelchair, picked up where she left off. "I see what you mean. I get right to the point. This is the critical link that unites all of this. Elif's youth, what happened to Mr. Mehmet, the loss of my legs. As I told you before, Elif had relationships with many men in her teenage years. These weren't very healthy relationships. Elif usually set her sights on men who were above her in age and status, and she used all kinds of methods until she obsessed with them and obtained them. Some of the men she had a relationship with were influenced by Elif's initial morbid effort and fell in love with her. When this happened, Elif was leaving the man she had praised 2 days earlier. Some, who were more vigilant, realized that something was wrong with Elif and ran away. In this case, Elif, with the anger of rejection, sometimes haunts these men for years in various ways. Of course, it would be naive to expect someone who is romantically involved like this to behave normally in other areas of life. Although I can't prove it, I'm sure Elif has been involved in many crimes over the years. But I'm not going into it here so as not to distract from the subject. Elif got pregnant right after she finished college. She had been pregnant many times before, but had had an abortion. I don't know why he behaved differently that time. I don't know the father of the child either, but to make a long story short, she gave birth in the year 2001 or 2002. Her child was a boy. He's in his 20s now. Mehmet Demirsoy interjected. He's the same age as Boris? Exactly, Mr. Mehmet. Although I tried to distance myself from Elif by making various excuses after those years, our friendship somehow continued. A few years after the birth, I heard that the child had some chronic health problems. This time, Kemal Gursoy was the one who interrupted İPek Sahin. Was the problem with his kidneys? The 4 people at the table looked at Kemal Gursoy in surprise at the same time, as if to say, "How do you know?" "Please continue, Mrs. İPek. I'll explain later." Alright. One of the poor boy's kidneys was absent from birth. The other was only working at 30% efficiency, and his condition was deteriorating. He had been on dialysis since his middle school years. Simul Ezen asked, "What happened next?" "I don't know exactly. For the past few years, Elif hasn't talked about her son. But when what happened to Mr. Mehmet's son and my accident overlapped, I thought this issue was important." "Do you think the child might be dead?" "I don't know, but I don't think so, Mr. Jamal. If there was such a thing, I would have heard about it." There was a short silence when İPUCU Sahin's lectures were over. Then Ismail Chetin asked, "What did you find, Kemal?" As Ms. İPUCU said, Elif Yilmaz's cases are not just about having abusive and obsessive relationships. Looking at what was going on, it was clear from the beginning that he was not alone in his messes. In order to shed light on the present, I should have known about Elif Yilmaz's past. Since I am no longer a cop, I have limited access to some resources. My dear friend Simul helped me with this and found the information I wanted from him and forwarded it to me. I compared the files sent by Simul with the personnel information of Sisley Research Hospital, the institution where Elif worked. I came across some interesting results. The 6 employees at the hospital had a noticeable segregation of their days off from the rest of the hospital staff. One of them, of course, was Elif Yilmaz. The others were the hospital's chief physician and plastic surgeon Dr. Semi Karakok, nephrologist Dr. Tunke Keskinal, nurse Eileen Sarjan and 2 nurses Hakan Selik and Osman Akaya. The annual leaves used by these 6 names not only exceeded the number of official days, but often overlapped each other. So when they weren't working they were spending time together. The more I digged, the more interesting things I noticed. 6 friends started working at Sisley Research Hospital on the same dates, except for a few days or weekly differences. As I continued, I saw that the situation was the same in the institutions they worked for before. There were also unusual money flows in the bank accounts. Particularly noteworthy were the astronomical money transfers to the bank accounts of Hakan Selik and Osman Akaya, who seemed unlikely to have won large sums through legal means, which appeared to have been made several times at irregular intervals. The first such transfer, as far as I can reach, took place when the team was working at Medipol Hospital, which was their previous place of duty before they started working at Sisley Research Hospital. While examining the file sent by Simul, I saw that an investigation was launched at Medipol Hospital at that time on suspicion of organ trafficking, but no conclusion was reached. There are a lot of similarities about these 6 people. But if I go into these details we will be off topic. In summary, we have a kind of medical criminal gang that has been acting together for years and has not been caught until now. Let's talk about why and how Nurse Eileen Sarjan was killed. From the data we have, it appears that the woman was a member of the gang. In this case, it would be naive to attribute Mehmet Bey's attempt to confess his son's situation to his succumbing to his conscience. Such situations are usually encountered when accomplices have disagreements with each other. So there are 2 basic options in the middle. Eileen Sarjan either didn't get her fair share of money, or she was having an affair with one of the doctors, most likely Tunke Keskinal, and she was deceived and wanted to take revenge for it. İPUCU Sahin interjected and asked, "Why with Tunke Keskinal?" "Because I have some reason to believe that Semi Karakok is in a relationship with Elif Yilmaz." Mehmet Demirsoy threw away the color that was already absent. He took a sip of water. Kemal Gursoy continued. "Anyway, it seems that they first tried to get words out of the woman's mouth and then killed her with medical methods in accordance with their style. Although it is difficult to say for sure, I can say that Semi Karakok undertook the killing since she was in a relationship with Tunke Keskinal. When it comes to the disposal of the body, it is clear that Hakan Selik and Osman Akaya, who have been running errands for the team since the early days, undertook this task. I had the opportunity to observe these 2 in action, as I will tell you about in a moment." Simul Ezen said, "Are you talking about the incident in Sile?" "Exactly." Ismail Chetin asked, "So what happened to Elif Yilmaz's son? What is the child's name? Who was his father and what happened to him? Have you been able to find them?" Kemal Gursoy said, "I could have found it. But soon it won't be necessary for reasons that you will all understand," he said. Mehmet Demirsoy asked, "Who was the young woman who followed me? Or was I dreaming?" "No, you didn't dream, Mr. Mehmet. As for who the girl is, I'd rather show it to you than tell you. So, how? You'll figure it out soon, don't worry. If you wish, let me first explain what happened to Mr. Mehmet in the light of what we have talked about so far. About 3 years ago, Nurse Elif Yilmaz and her boyfriend Dr. Semi Karakok took action to save Elif Yilmaz's son, whose condition was deteriorating. When they can't find a way to legally save the young man, who needs a kidney transplant to come back to life, they devise a diabolical plan. Taking advantage of the opportunities provided by his profession, Semi Karakok scans the data of patients who have visited the hospital in the last few years. Among the few registered patients who show tissue compatibility with Elif's son, the stones begin to fall into place in the minds of the duo, who realize that Mehmet Demirsoy's son, Baris Demirsoy, overlaps exactly in terms of age, gender and physical appearance. In order to elaborate on their plans, they examine the private life of the Demirsoy family. Mehmet Demirsoy recently lost his wife, Pervin Demirsoy, to cancer and is depressed. Baris Demirsoy, who is about to graduate from university, has lost himself in nightlife and motorcycles in the void of losing his mother. Things are going better than the duo expected. Elif Yilmaz, who is experienced in relationships, is still young and beautiful. It would be child's play for Mehmet Demirsoy to manipulate someone in his position. While planning where and when to take action, one day Mehmet Demirsoy gets worse behind the wheel and stops by the hospital. Elif didn't even have to take the first step. Thus, their relationship begins and quickly goes to marriage. Baris Demirsoy rightly reacts to the situation and becomes increasingly distant from his father. Last New Year's Eve, as conditions were ripe, it was time to implement the second and most important part of the plan. Hakan Selik and Osman Akaya, under the orders of Semi Karakok and Elif Yilmaz and under the direction of Elif Yilmaz, follow Baris Demirsoy as he goes to have fun with his friends on New Year's Eve. While Baris Demirsoy was returning home on his motorcycle after leaving the nightclub in the morning, they rammed him with their vehicles in a suitable place, causing him to have an accident. While all this is going on, Elif Yilmaz is having dinner with Mehmet Demirsoy and his family. So why is it that 2 days have passed since the motorcycle accident, and there is no news from Baris? Because the young man was not hospitalized. It was moved by Hakan Selik and Osman Akaya to the summer house in Sile, which the team had been using for their dirty work for years, or rather to the warehouse of the house, which had been converted into a kind of operating room under the stairs. At the same time, Elif's son, who was under the care of Dr. Tunke Keskinal at Sisley Research Hospital, was taken to Sile in a vehicle carrying Semi Karakok, Tunke Keskinal and Eileen Sargent. Mr. Mehmet, what I am about to tell you from here on out may shake you. Are you sure you want me to continue? Yes, please do. In the warehouse in Sile, with the help of nephrologists Tunke Keskinal, Eileen Sargent and Semi Karakok, they transplanted the kidney they took from the unconscious Baris Demirsoy to Elif Yilmaz's son. Mehmet Demirsoy seemed to get worse, but he recovered quickly. The hospital chapter started after this first illegal operation. They took the identity and other documents of Baris, who was not in a position to know himself. They brought Elif's son to Sisley Research Hospital to show him as Baris Demirsoy. I probably don't need to mention that there were no skin burns, lung injuries or leg fractures on the part of Baris Demirsoy or the other young man. It's just that Elif's son had to look like Baris Demirsoy enough, and they invented the burn tail to hide their real intentions. So? Yes, Mr. Mehmet. Your instincts did not fail you. The young man who was with you after the accident was not your son. He was the son of Elif Yilmaz. However, after a while, some setbacks occurred that Semi Karakok and Elif Yilmaz could not foresee. The first of these, as you know, was İPUCU Hanım's communication with Mr. Mehmet. Unfortunately, this situation cost Ms. İPUCU dearly. Another problem was that Eileen Sargent, with whom they had a falling out, tried to confess. Eileen Sargent was not as lucky as Ms. İPUCU. But the third problem they faced was much bigger and more unusual than the first two. Kemal Gürsoy paused to catch his breath. He took a sip of his drink. He looked at his friend's facial expressions to gauge how they would react to what he was saying. Simul Izan asked, "Will you please tell me that last thing, Kemal?" "Nope." Barak Sahin, who has remained silent since they met at the cafe, objected, saying, "What does this mean?" Kemal Gürsoy said, "Please don't get angry. I have no intention of hiding anything from anyone. But I'll have to keep the last part of the story to myself for the sake of everyone. When the time comes, you will understand why I behaved like this," and then turned to Ismail Chetin. "But first, I must consult you about the legal aspect of the matter, Ismail. Is what we've put forward so far enough to warrant an arrest?" "I'm afraid not. It's all out there, but as you know very well, nothing matters in law except concrete evidence." "You're right. So I ask you, my friends, to give me another week. If luck helps, you'll find out the rest of the story, and the culprits will get the punishment they deserve." Mehmet Demirsoy tried his luck for the last time. "Mr. Kemal, do you think my son?" "Mr. Mehmet, your son is alive." It was early in the morning a week later, when Chief Superintendent Simul Izan ordered 2 young police officers to enter Dr. Semi Karakok's room at the hospital. Kemal Gursoy and Mehmet Demirsoy were also there. The Sahin couple and Ismail Chetin had agreed not to be present on the condition that they would be informed of all that had happened. Semil Izin thought that unnecessary crowding was a risk factor in such cases. When the two young policemen duly but firmly entered, Semih Karakok did not grasp the situation at first. When he realized what had happened to him, he first objected, then helplessly accepted. Then one of the police officers left Karakok's room and with the help of one of the hospital's security guards, he brought Elif Yilmaz to the plastic surgeon's room. After the atmosphere had calmed down enough, Semih Karakok and Elif Yilmaz listened to the story Kemal Gursoy had told his friends at the cafe in Ortaköy the previous week, while looking sideways at the two police officers standing over them. After waiting coolly and patiently for Kemal Gursoy to finish his speech, Semih Karakok said, "Mr. Kemal, you are really like a joke. Are you hoping that this tale will work? What about you, Mr. Jamal? Don't you see that your friend is out of his mind?" Kemal Gursoy said nonchalantly, "Mr. Semih, to be honest, I agree with you exactly." Dr. Karakok looked at Semil Izin angrily and said, "This crazy guy came to my office 2 weeks ago disguised as a patient?" Semil Izin did not allow Semih Karakok to finish his speech. "Shut up or you'll get punched, you vile fucker. Let my friend finish his speech." Semih Karakok blushed with anger. Elif Yilmaz was not making eye contact with anyone. Kemal Gursoy said, "As I have just said, even if you know that what I have told you so far is true, you are right to object. Because they have a weak legal basis. A few blurry photos taken in Sile, a woman who was killed by whom is unknown, some shady money transfers. But we haven't reached the crucial point yet. And it will be more persuasive for you to see this part of the work with your own eyes than for me to tell you." Kemal Gursoy calmly called a number on his phone. 30 seconds later there was a knock on the door. Dr. Semih Karakok's room was first entered by a nice young woman in her mid-20s, followed by Baris Demirsoy and then Elif Yilmaz's son. 2 days later, Mehmet and Baris Demirsoy, Semil Izin, Ismail Chetin, İPUCU and Barak Sahin, Melek Gunari the girlfriend of Baris Demirsoy, and the son of Elif Yilmaz were at the house of Kemal Gursoy in Beykoz. Kemal Gursoy, who had been living alone for years, seemed to have a hard time adapting to the crowd that filled his house. When he was bored, he averted his eyes and looked at his aquarium. The day before, Ismail Chetin's fish, which looked like his mother-in-law, had died. Mehmet Demirsoy had not yet fully recovered from the trauma he experienced when he saw his son in the hospital 2 days ago, but he was fine. Turning to Melek Gunnar, he said, "So you were the one who followed me from the beginning?" "Yes, Mr. Mehmet. It was Baris who asked me to do this. He wasn't in a position where I could refuse him. Now that I think about it, such a dark period may have led to some very good things." İPUCU Sahin did not seem to agree with Mehmet Demirsoy's opinion. Ismail Chetin said, "Friends, if you want, let's stop the idle conversation so that the hero of the event can summarize everything tidily for us that we all know our part of what happened. But after all, it's Kemal who put his life on the line to shed light on the case and lock up the criminals." Kemal Gursoy said, "There is nothing to exaggerate. I got lucky. And by bringing this case to me you have done me a favor. Anyway, I don't actually have much to add except for a few details. You know most of them." "Don't say that," Semil Izin said. "It is still a mystery to me how Baris survived and how Serkan became a confessor to his mother." Serkan was the name of Elif's mysterious son. Baris, who was thought to have bled to death after the illegal kidney transplant operation performed by Tunçay Keskinal in the warehouse in Sile, was taken to the Belgrade forest by Osman Akaya and Hakan Selik on the orders of Semih Karakok, where Eileen Sarjan's body was later hidden. But something very unexpected happened there. Akaya and Selik did not have the opportunity to bury Baris' body, which they thought was lifeless. Because even though it was extremely early in the morning, an elderly couple was driving through the forest in their vehicle. The two accomplices fled, leaving the helpless Baris there as he was. Of course, they didn't tell Semih Karakok or Elif Yilmaz about this. Their only reservation was that the body would be found too soon. Of course that didn't happen. Anyway, the old man left his wife in the car and went to Baris. He checked to see if he was alive. Baris was alive. He rushed her to the hospital. Baris, who had lost one of his kidneys and lost a lot of blood, recovered in a few weeks with careful care because he was young and able-bodied. After he regained consciousness, he wanted to understand what had happened to him on his own, instead of immediately returning to his father. When I say on his own, I mean of course with the help of his beautiful friend Melek. And probably a few other close friends of yours as well. "Yes," said Baris. "Mert and Senaz also helped a lot. But you go ahead please." Kemal Gursoy nodded. He stared at his aquarium for a second and then resumed his speech. The young people, who closely followed every move of Mehmet Demirsoy and his close friend Ismail Chetin, investigated who I was and of course understood my role when they noticed that they often came here. From that point on, we were always in touch with the young people. Mehmet Demirsoy seemed to be a little upset. Why did you hide this from us? As a matter of fact, it was Bari's decision, not mine. But if it were up to me to make that decision, I probably would have done the same. There were also some, how shall we say it, family reasons involved. Bari's was a little resentful of you for marrying Elif Yilmaz. But that was never the real reason for secrecy. In order for the investigation to proceed safely, everyone had to think that peace was dead. Mehmet Demirsoy tilted his head slightly and said, "You are right." Kemal Gursoy continued, this time without looking at his aquarium. As for what Ms. İPek went through, it is highly likely that at that time, Elif Yilmaz was secretly checking her husband's phone and emails whenever she could. In this way he became aware of what İPek Hanım wrote. She sabotaged Mrs. İpek's vehicle to disable her. More precisely, she told Osman Akaya or Hakan Selik, who had been doing the errands of the team from the very beginning, to do so. And for a while she shut down her old friend. The most mysterious character in this story is Serkan. We still don't know him, Barak Sahin said. Ismail Chetin interjected. If you ask me, Kemal hasn't detonated the bomb yet. And only Serkan and Kemal know what this bomb is. You are telling the truth, Serkan said. And he threw the ball to Kemal Gursoy by saying, when Mr. Kemal finishes what he has to say, maybe I will say a thing or two about myself. Kemal Gursoy entered the conversation. Or you see, when I'm done with what I'm going to say, a mysterious stranger knocks on my door, walks in, and tells us things that will stun us all once again. But since Serkan prefers me to complete my story, let me tell you a few details. When Baris first came to me, he told me that after he dropped his girlfriend off at his house on New Year's Eve, he was followed by a vehicle and the vehicle deliberately came on top of him. He vaguely remembered the aftermath of the accident. Two people got out of the vehicle that was following him, put him in their car and took him to a house with a garden in a deserted area, after a journey that took maybe a year, maybe a few hours. But once inside, the house looked more like a hospital. From these words of Baris, it was concluded that this surgery, which he was subjected to against his will, was probably performed somewhere outside the city. Finding this place would undoubtedly be useful in illuminating many things. I seized this opportunity by provoking Semih Karakok after the death of Eileen Sargent. When the man realized that things were wrong, he went to this house where he did his dirty work to eliminate the evidence. I followed him. The house was in Sile, near the famous lighthouse. What I saw revealed everything, but neither the photographs I had taken nor the conclusions I drew from the report Semih had sent me provided enough evidence to lock up Elif Yilmaz and her friends. At this point, Bari should have stepped in and Serkan should have cooperated. Admittedly, I even considered using force if necessary to get Serkan to talk. Because it was not possible for me to make a legal inquiry. By the way, I didn't know the young man's name yet. Then something happened that I didn't expect. Kemal Gursoy interrupted his speech and looked at his watch for a long time. He seemed to be waiting for someone. It was dark when the door of the garden house in Beykoz rang. The guests, who listened to Kemal Gursoy's narration as if hypnotized, were startled by this unexpected ringtone. Kemal Gursoy winked at Serkan as he calmly walked towards the door. Serkan responded in kind. Gursoy opened the door. A man who looked to be in his 60s appeared at the door. Despite his advancing age, the man was remarkably good-looking. Welcome, Mr. Ünal, we have been waiting for you. Ünal Aydin walked in with a calm and confident attitude. Only a few seconds later, İpek Sahin recognized her physiology teacher, whom she had last seen 21 years ago. Kemal Gursoy said, "Friends, let me introduce those of you who do not know Professor Dr. Ünal Aydin. He is Elif Yilmaz and İpek Sahin's professor from the university, Serkan's father and the person who saved Bari's life. Serkan, Baris and Melek already know him well. I think Ms. İpek will have remembered her. Mr. Ünal, if you wish, you can tell the rest of the story. But first, let me offer you something to drink." "Thank you, there is no need for this at all. I find it difficult to comprehend how a very dark period I lived through many years ago could be so connected to my present. But without further ado, let me share with you what I experienced. About 6 months ago, my dear wife and I were in the Belgrade forest early in the morning. I think you'll wonder what we're doing in the woods on a winter day and at that hour. I'll get there later. As we drove forward at that hour, when the forest was completely empty and it was not yet fully lightened, we noticed a vehicle parked on the trail in silhouettes a few meters away. I parked my Jeep at a convenient distance. Instructing my wife to stay in the car, I cautiously walked towards the two shadows who were making suspicious movements. After I took a few steps, they ran into their vehicle and drove away. Then I saw the young man, Boris, lying motionless on the ground. I thought he was dead at first, but miraculously he was alive. We rushed him to the hospital. He soon came back to life. A few weeks later we had a close dialogue with him. When she told me what had happened to her, it turned out that Elif Yilmaz, an old acquaintance of mine, was the son of her current husband. Bari's stolen kidney was transplanted to Serkan, my son. So how can someone like Elif and a man in my position have a child together? Of course, this is not a story that I am bragging about, but it has happened and I don't mind telling you. My wife and I got married in 1996. 2 years later we had a daughter. We named her Özlem. We had a good life. Then one day, Özlem was kidnapped before she was even 4 years old. We didn't hear from him for months. We did everything that could be done and tried not to lose hope, but it didn't help. We received the news that Özlem had been killed. We were both devastated. We couldn't recover for a long time. And my wife and I had a falling out. More precisely, we couldn't handle the meeting because we reminded each other of Özlem. That's when I got to know Elif. I think it was 2001. He was a senior and I was taking his class as well. Elif started to be close to me in a way that I never expected. At first, this intimacy was in the form of a very innocent conversation. Then it began to change shape. I guess you know what I mean. When that happened, I started distancing. He wanted to be with me and when I refused, he threw tantrums, yelled and insulted me. When this happened, Elif was only a few weeks away from graduation. When he couldn't find any other way, I told him that I couldn't be with my students to get him away, and that he should call me after his graduation. It really left me alone for a while. But he came home the summer he graduated. More precisely to my summer cottage. I was there by myself. Elif's demeanor had changed a lot. He was as understanding and moderate as in the early days. And that's when we were together for the first and last time with him. Immediately after they were together, their behavior changed tremendously. Physical attacks were added to the bouts of jealousy and insults. From that day on, I didn't see him no matter what he did. When he realized that he would not see me again, he made false accusations against me. So I was dismissed. I also had a falling out with my wife. Fortunately, over time the truth came out. I was reinstated. My wife and I were reunited. But years later, I found out that I had a son from a one-time relationship with Elif. When I found out about this, Serkan was in middle school. Unfortunately, he had some congenital health problems. From the day I found out, I paid for all the treatment cost. Mehmet Demirsoy interjected and said, I think it is clear why Serkan testified against his mother. Exactly. Ismail Chetin said, you did not tell the most mysterious part of the story. What was a 60-odd-year-old couple doing in the Belgrade forest at the crack of dawn? Kemal Gursoy answered the question asked to Yunal Aydin. I think we have exhausted and upset Mr. Yunal enough. If he will allow me to answer this question, I will answer it. Of course, Mr. Kemal. Please. The lifeless body of Yunal Bey's 4-year-old daughter, Özlem Aydin, was found 22 years ago, exactly on the day and time when Baris was abandoned in the forest, almost in the same place where Baris was left. And since then, Mr. Yunal and his wife have been visiting here on the same day and time every year. There was a deep silence. No one knew exactly how to react to what was happening. Then Melek Gunnar took on the task of dissipating the heavy air. He said, Mr. Kemal, I have been likening you to someone I have known since the first day I saw you, but I couldn't make it out. Your upright white hair, your bony face, your goatee, your sharp gaze behind your glasses. Do you have any idea who he is? Kemal Gursoy lied by looking at the aquarium instead of Melek Gunnar, saying, believe me, I have no idea. Asterisk. Kemal Gursoy, who sent off his guests, picked up the chess book that Ismail Chetin gave him as a gift on his birthday. He went to the head of the chess set to study the party in which Petrosian and Karis were playing. The game began with the English opening. Then his eye caught the framed photograph on the wooden table a few feet away. He stood up. He walked over to the table. He picked up the photo. He stared at it for a long time. In the center of the photo was himself. His hair was still black. He hugged his beautiful wife, who was standing to his right. To his left stood his 12-year-old son. With his sassy but sincere smile. A tear fell from Kemal Gursoy's eye. He wiped away the flowing tear with his hand. He left the photograph on the table, turning it upside down. He became the head of the chess set again. He played 1.c4 as Grandmaster Tigran Petrosian did. The end.